For today's Dharma talk, I would like to start with a quote that you've heard many times before at our fellowship, and it's from Guillaume Kabose Sensei, my mentor. And the quote is, "Acceptance is transcendence." And right now, I think we're living in a very auspicious time to be cultivating the practice of a compassionate acceptance. And I really appreciate this quote from Julio Vincent Gambuto, a really excellent article in Medium that was published recently. Quote, "It's the greatest gift ever unwrapped, the great pause. It is, in a word, profound. Please don't recoil from the bright light beaming through the window. I know it hurts your eyes. It hurts mine, too. But the curtain is wide open. What the crisis has given us is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see ourselves and our country in the plainest of views." End quote. I really love that. And I think that here is the heart of what compassionate acceptance is. It's all about seeing ourselves and who we really are. But here is the rub. When we say we should accept our lives, it seems like what we're trying to tell people is, oh, well, just accept your lot, accept your fate. And the first things that comes to most of our minds when we talk about acceptance is that of being a defeatist. And it's interesting how visceral this feeling is. We almost say in defiance right away, no, I don't have to accept this. No, it doesn't have to be this way. No, I can change it. No, I have the power to do something different. And I think it's important that the type of acceptance we're talking here isn't that kind of defeatist giving up type or passive acceptance. So what does it mean when we say acceptance is transcendence? And what is this acceptance? Guillaume Kabose Sensei goes on to say, quote, "Acceptance means understanding of life, not feeling as a victim, not a feeling of sacrifice or a feeling of being defeated. Without accepting things as they are, without knowing the truth of what is, of what I am, then true life does not begin. The acceptance of truth, the acceptance of true life as I am, as you are, or the conditions in which you are, the true realization of this fact is acceptance." End quote. Again, I want the emphasis to be that you are not a victim. This acceptance is not the acceptance of some kind of victimhood. So he goes on to teach that we, through acceptance, can become the master of the situation instead of its victim. Again, the emphasis is not on victim, but the emphasis is on empowerment. He goes on to teach that through acceptance, we become the master of the situation. For myself, when I rail against my birth, my childhood, my bad luck, my loneliness, my illness, or my disappointment and shame, I'm getting stuck. Many of us want to fix the past. We want to change the reality of the causes and conditions that our lives are and that have brought us here. We have a tendency to refuse to accept the reality of what happened to us or what is happening to us. And whenever we are stuck in this frame of mind, we are stuck. We are out of the present moment. We are stuck in our dis-ease. We may begrudgingly say, well, I have to accept it, but we still do not really accept it. We say, well, it is what it is, and throw it off 100 times. But our heart, mind, and our bodies do not believe our words. Acceptance is not defeat. Guillaume Sensei goes on to say, quote, in Buddhism, this is not such an attitude of defeatedness. Acceptance means understanding the truth, end quote. Acceptance means understanding the truth. Greg Kretsch, one of the foremost teachers in the West of Nikon and Morita therapy, both Japanese forms of therapy born out of Japanese Buddhism, says this, and I think it's a really good quote. Generally, we think of acceptance as being in opposition to action. Acceptance is an important element of action. In fact, we might say that acceptance is our internal human condition, as well as its external condition, is the very heart of action, end quote. And I think this is really important, especially when you think of come as you are or Namu Amida Butsu. Healing becomes possible when we accept ourselves and one another as we are. It also happens when we invite our lives to come to us just as they are, regardless of content, and say, Namu Amida Butsu. This is the gate through which we can begin to see ourselves and others, maybe for the very first time. Greg Kretsch goes on to write, quote, the acceptance of others, the value of acceptance goes far beyond acceptance of our thoughts and feelings. Most strong-willed people consistently try to control their external conditions of life. In some cases, these external conditions can be controlled, but in many other cases, they cannot. Perhaps our most common tendency is try to control other people, what they do, what they think of us, or how they feel. To be honest, this effort to try to control others often gets us into trouble. So we need to learn the wisdom and the skill of simply accepting what is. End quote. When we try to control others, we're not seeing them. We are seeing our story of how they should behave or should not behave. We're projecting what we want them to be instead of what they are. When we try to control life in the same way, we cannot help but become disappointed. And still, we avoid looking at ourselves at all costs. When things don't work out, we don't like it. And we also don't like accepting what we may have to face about ourselves if we really look at ourselves. When we begin to realize how little control we actually have over people and events, it creates a cognitive dissonance. So to fix it, so we don't have to look at ourselves and who we really are, we start to cast blame on others. And on a broad cultural level, we start creating elaborate conspiracy theories. Anything to avoid to look directly at what is. Conspiracies and stories are just another manifestation of being victimized by how things are supposed to be or not supposed to be. The problem is that we don't see ourselves or others because we are so caught up in our idealized views about how we should be, we cannot accept things as they are. We would rather accept delusion because it costs too much. What cost is that? Well, sometimes we might be leery about fully embracing acceptance. I like something that Mike Robbins has written about this, and I felt this way myself. And here's the quote. The truth is, I've been scared to fully embrace acceptance, worrying that if I truly accept certain aspects of myself that I don't like, things about others that bother me, or circumstances in my life, or in other words, that aren't okay with me, then somehow I wouldn't be motivated to change them in a positive way, or even worse, I would get resigned about them and they would always stay the way they are, which of course to me would be bad or wrong, end quote. How many of us have felt this way? He goes on to quote one of my favorite quotes from Carl Jung. He says, quote, what you resist persists, end quote. How many of us know that wisdom already? Robbins goes on to say, quote, it seems that I am constantly resisting, more like fighting against the way things are. Whether it's with our body, our work, our spouse, our family members, our friends, our coworkers, our finances, the state of the world and the economy, or whatever it is that we're faced. We are often arguing with reality instead of accepting it the way it is. End quote. By the very definition, this is delusional. We are all delusional. Now, I also want to talk a little bit about accepting others and trying to control them. How important people are in our lives that we are right now not accepting. Who in our life? What important people in our lives are we not accepting right now? And I think it's interesting that if we try to control the most, the things that we try to control the most is not ourselves, but other people. And yet none of us would say that we're the controlling type. Much of the suffering that occurs in relationships is related to our efforts to try and control other people. What's the alternative? Well, the alternative is to accept them as they are, an option which is much more compatible with loving them and accepting them. When we stop trying to fix or change the other person, we can see them and honor them as an amazing, unrepeatable life, and not as a character in our story that should act a certain way or do certain things. Our life is not a scripted life. So back to this acceptance. This acceptance is not giving up. It's not about sitting back and just taking it. It's much bigger than that. It's about opening up space into our life that we can engage with our life, that we can become more intimate. Here's a wonderful teaching from Luna Kadampa. Quote, resignation is buying into appearances, I think. So acceptance is not the same as resignation or fatalism for that matter. In a way, acceptance is an existential decision. We decide to say to each thing that arrives, not so much all is well, which can be hard to pull off, especially at first, but yes, all is here. It's already here. If we feel disturbed, hindered, crushed, depressed, or melancholic, we are aware this is how we're feeling, and it's already arisen and cannot be undone. So we accept it. Patient acceptance enables us to take our tragedy of samsara without turning our life into a tragedy by identifying with its suffering, end quote. Patience and acceptance go hand in hand. We can begin to cultivate acceptance, as Greg Crutch teaches, through acceptance and stopping our futile escape from things as they are. We can live more naturally, grounded, and meaningful when we are in the present moment with our lives just as they are. Greg Crutch goes on to say, quote, "What will you do with the summer heat? Accept it or resist it? What will you do with your anxiety? Accept it or struggle with it?" And what we could say now, in what we're going through, what are you going to do with your stay-at-home order? Accept it or fight it? So ultimately, cultivating acceptance is about letting go to this resistance of allowing reality to be what it is. Pema Chodron teaches that, quote, "Resistance is the fundamental operating mechanism of what we call ego. Resisting life causes suffering," end quote. I love that again. I'm going to read it one more time. Resisting life causes suffering. That's good. When I say that, when you think about what you're resisting, where are you feeling that resistance in your life? Is it the stay-at-home order? Is it the disconnection from other people, the uncertainty, all the time with your own thoughts? Sometimes the challenge is just being with your loved ones all the time. We're not used to that. Where do you feel that resistance in your body? The first thing we can do to cultivate a compassionate acceptance is to acknowledge our need to control, and that the amount of control we have is not in sync with reality. As one Tibetan teacher puts it, quote, "People who believe they can change or control everything are usually in a great deal of pain, because this is simply not possible," end quote. So how can we cultivate compassion and acceptance? Well, I love this from Vinny Ferraro, and he's a meditation teacher in LA. And he learned something from Ajahn Sumedho of the Theravada tradition about a line that his teacher gave him. And it's, "Right now, it's like this." And I like what Vinny says about it. So, quote from Vinny. "For me, using phrases like 'this is' a turning toward aspect of practicing with right now. It's like this. I think it resonates for a lot of our Sangha and people in general who are tired of pretending that life is not hard. Right now, it's like this" is an invitation to explore what is present. So even though the mind threatens me with the idea that it's going to be like this forever, this phrase helps me to call bullshit on that, end quote. So here's a phrase, here's a tool, a nugget that we can use in our practice. Right now, it's like this. This is a form of acceptance, and it's very similar to the invitation of Namo Amida Butsu. When we say, attend to each and all, attend to all and each, right now, attend to the present moment. It's like this is an invitation to explore, to be ever present with the present. This gives us more space to breathe and to just be who we are, with all of our anxieties, with all of our griefs, with all of our sadnesses. we take them with us. We say Namo Amida Butsu to all of them. We're not trying to avoid them or transcend them. We're trying to wake up through them. As Luna Kandampa teaches, quote, with acceptance, we open up an infinite inner space because we have given up on the idea that things should be otherwise. As Geshe Claysong says, quote, we have given up the idea of filtering, controlling, validating, and judging everything, end quote. So ultimately, this idea of cultivating a compassionate acceptance is a threshold toward a more intimate exploration of really being alive and not seeing the world through all these filters of our myriad of stories and expectations. These stories that give birth to so much dis-ease and disappointment, that create so much noise and blur vision, that makes it hard for us to see ourselves, to see each other, to see what's present in the now. So I want to leave you with this from Guillaume Kubose Sensei. Acceptance is transcendence. Acceptance is awakening. Namo Amida Butsu. And a couple of comments too. I mean, the acceptance is transcendence. It doesn't mean that, we stay in an abusive relationship because we just have to accept the fact that it's an abusive relationship. But it's the fact that we accept it's abusive relationship that gives us the steps of action to get out of the abusive relationship. The kind of acceptance we're talking about is that acceptance where we're arguing with reality, where we're denying the reality of the situation. In an abusive relationship, we tend to deny that it's an abusive relationship. We make all kinds of mental gymnastics and excuses and whatnot to stay where we're at. We do this constantly when it comes to climate change. We have all kinds of very complicated and not so complicated stories and things to tell ourselves so we don't have to face the reality of the changes that are coming. When we see injustice in the world, we don't accept that there's injustice in the world in the sense that there's nothing I can do about it. I accept that there is suffering in the world and injustice in the world, and therefore that informs my practice, that informs that which I have a modicum of control over, and that is my interaction with each human being that I come in contact with. It is not this defeatism. It is a very dynamic acceptance of things as they are so that I can attend to them. Until I can acknowledge that I am wounded, that I need healing, there will be no healing. Until I can acknowledge, like Villa McCurdy, I can never say his name. He says, as long as there are sick people, I am sick. And they think that's a beautiful sentiment. And until we can accept the realities of these things, then transformation will never be possible. That it is only possible through the acceptance of things as they are. Again, it doesn't mean it's okay. It just means it's a way to give us space then to attend to it. It's like equanimity. Equanimity is not saying that all these horrible things that are happening to me are okay. It's simply saying all these things that are happening to me are not okay, but I will be okay. And for me, that's an everyday Buddhist kind of definition of equanimity, and an everyday kind of Buddhist explanation of acceptance. Your own voice. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for being here. My challenge to myself and to each of you is to really embrace it is what it is, but in a very deliberate and aware sense. Instead of just a throw off, it is what it is, we say that with affirmation, it is what it is. And then to take what Vinnie Ferrano uses, right, for now, it's not this way forever, that we know at the heart of everything is change. What we're going through right now will change. The stay-at-home order will come to an end. But it's a call to us. It's a call to each of us that our relationship with ourselves, with our communities, with our planet, it's a call that these are not necessarily working as well as we think they are. And the first thing we're going to want to do is to go back to normal. We're going to want to do what we used to do. And it's going to be hard not to, because it's revealed to us those things inside us that need to be attended to. So let us accept the reality of the situation. This may not, and more than likely, not be the last pandemic. We may be here again. If we accept that as a possibility, what does that look at? What do we attend to? How do we interact with our communities, with ourselves, with our families? What do we do? What steps do we take? What do we cultivate? And action begins when we accept the reality of the situation. Then we can step forward off of our cushion into the world with an open heart, ready to be medicine for one another. That is my aspiration for myself and my aspiration to each of you. Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you, everyone, for watching the Dharma Talk. We are grateful for your practice and grateful that you have joined us. And if you want to support the fellowship, we would be very grateful. You can go to our webpage, which is saltlakebuddhist.org, and there you will find a tab on how to donate online. And we look forward to your support. We also look forward to seeing you once the stay-in-place order is done, and to have you come join us at our Salt Lake City physical location at Vitalize Studio in Mill Creek. We look forward to that day, and we enjoy spending time with you. And again, thank you for your practice, and thank you for joining us.